In this session, we will discuss whether or not your association should be donating to, inviting, or generally involved with political, civic, or religious organizations. Utilizing association funds and resources for outside organizations can be tricky for boards. As a reminder, if you require CEUs, you need to be watching this program via our GoToWebinar system. You also need to watch the entire program. But don't worry, we have tossed in some breaks and surprises in the program here and there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you a little bit later. I'm back already. I had an opportunity to interview Don Guardian, who is the ex-mayor of Atlantic City. He was also the business administrator for a very large municipality in New Jersey. And he's going to offer some advice on how associations can deal with governmental officials. So you can look forward to that. And once again, I'll see you a little bit later. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hi, how you doing?
Great. So we're going to talk about political, charitable, and religious donations in regard to associations. So let's start off. Can an association donate to a charity?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It would depend on a couple of different things, but I think probably yes. It's not clear, but I think probably yes.
Okay, so I was going to also ask you about civic and political causes. Are we going to treat all three of these items together the same, or should we talk about them separately?
I think separately, only because ironically, I think the civic and political donations are probably more likely to be consistent with the board's fiduciary duty than the charitable, ironically.
So that's actually was going to be one of my questions, and I think that's what you're getting at. What role does the board's duty to protect life, safety, and health and happiness of homeowners play in supporting causes? And then I'm also going to ask you the same question about candidates.
I think the sort of the life safety kind of thing is the catch-all thing that is a last refuge for a board that wants to do something it doesn't really have the power to do. Similar to what goes on, in the country when a particular government wants to take a particular action. It's always great if the Constitution that's involved specifically allows for it. Otherwise, they have to sort of work around it, make stuff up, and come up with an argument pursuant to a general. We have the power to make things better for people. And that's not really the role of a condominium or a homeowners association. So that's more challenging. The interest in donating to a candidate for office or a civic organization that's either of which might be focused on a particular issue, where the connection is more clear to the community, is generally more likely to be validated.
Because we're talking about a wide range of scenarios here, right? We could be talking about an association who they're going to build a sewage plant right outside the property line, compared to maybe a board or association just trying to support one particular candidate for maybe not as important reasons. Is that kind of an accurate statement?
I think that's accurate. I think a board that utilizes common expenses to support a candidate or a political movement based simply on ideology would likely be invalid. But a contribution that was targeted to a particular goal that you could connect to the association might be validated. I also think that a better argument could be made if for an association to donate equal amounts of money to two particular parties that happen to be in competition in a town, similar to what businesses do. Most businesses, they donate money to companies not because they actually believe in I mean, not companies, they donate, a company might donate money to a candidate, not so much because they believe in his or her ideology, left or right. They donate to the candidate or the party because they want access. They want a phone number to call when there's a problem. And if that's their interest, then there's no reason why they wouldn't donate to both candidates, both parties. And that's what a lot of them do. So I think to the extent that an association was involved in a municipal election, where there were specific municipal issues that had to be considered, a donation to either side would be more likely to be validated than a donation to one side or another, unless, because even if there's some specific issue like a sewer plant or something, or a gas station up for approval, it would be hard to tie a donation to a particular candidate to one particular thing, unless of course it was a quid pro quo, which is illegal. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't, if it's a bribe, then ironically it would make more sense. It would seem more valid if it was a bribe than it would if it was not. So it's kind of, interesting when you look at it that way.
All right, so I should have asked you this in the beginning. Is there anything in state law that prevents, and let's use New Jersey as an example. I know there's other people from other states, so they can check with their own state law. But as far as New Jersey goes, is there anything in state law that says an association can contribute to a charitable, civic, or political cause?
No, I'm not aware of anything like that. The better approach might be to look at it from the other angle, although this wouldn't necessarily affect our clients, the people that we interact with. But there may be regulations or rules with respect to what a source of funds from a candidate. I mean, the ability of a candidate to accept funds from certain things. There also are limitations on maybe where money can be procured from, like whether a civic association can take money from certain entities, inside or outside the neighborhood. Like, there's a lot of restrictions on, maybe there's a local civic association that's focused on, increasing the number of traffic lights or something. And in particular, one that might be right outside of a development. But the civic association is focused on traffic lights around the state and not necessarily in this town. And they're, and there's the management company wants to donate, but it manages at least from a different area. There may be limitations on the recipient of the money and how what source of funds it can, accept, or the source from which it can accept money.
So after state law and other requirements from the other end, in some cases, an association's governing documents may play or not play a role, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a role. There was years and years ago, a client of mine had in its bylaws a provision that required it to donate a certain amount of money to the local fire station. And it was a fire station that had been built presumably there were like 6 or 7 K-Mania developments that were being built in a specific town. This was in the 80s. And each of the associations had a bylaw provision that mandated that each of them donate a certain amount of money every year to the volunteer fire department. And there was actually case law and law about that, that was illegal. Those were planning board and governmental mandates that were passed along to the association through the developer. So the developer got approval, and a condition of the approval to build these projects, one of the conditions was that its governing documents, its bylaws, had to have a provision in it that would require the associations to donate money. And so in that particular instance, the goal was altruistic. I mean, on its face, you would think that it would be a good idea for each community to donate money to a local fire department, but as a matter of law, it's inappropriate for the government to force the developer to impose a condition upon people whom the developer hasn't even sold to yet to donate money to a particular thing. While today it was the fire department, the next day it could have been, the next time it could have been to a local political party, or God knows what these politicians will be up to. So as a result of that, all associations got together. We concluded that it was illegal, and nobody complied. And at that point, what happened was the fire department simply had to then ask for the money. So they would come and they would ask every year for the money. They would, talk about what, show their budget. The volunteer fire department had a budget. They'd show how much money they needed to be able to service those communities. And every association, as far as I knew, at least back then, would donate a significant amount of money. And that was, at least my view. I know other attorneys that worked at the time for those communities felt that that was completely appropriate use of association funds. The issue was the mandate was illegal. There wasn't anything illegal about the communities donating the money. Also, those communities down there used to donate bicycles to the local police department. And even though those bicycles weren't necessarily going to be used by the police exclusively in those neighborhoods, in those associations, every year the associations would get together and purchase some kind of equipment for the police, a bike, something that they felt would help the police department and make it more likely that the police would be more favorably, disposed to respond to calls. And, I felt and still felt that, and still do feel that those donations were, within the realm of acceptable, association, fund use.
So are you saying as long as the board can say that it's contributing towards the happiness of the community or the safety of the community, that is somewhat of the key here with these kind of donations?
Right. I mean, it's, it depends what the definition of is, right? I mean, it's like, it's all going to be in the eye of the beholder. So again, without making broad sort of comparisons to overall society, every person, everybody in charge can decide for themselves what's best for other people. And that's usually not something that society is supposed to encourage, because everybody's perspective is they always think they're right, but the system is usually supposed to, respect maybe sort of minority rights or people that don't necessarily agree with that. So I think that it really depends on what the connection is. So if a board thinks that it's in the best interest of the the community, and it's consistent with the welfare and health of the community to donate, $25,000 to the local, Democrat or Republican Party, I mean, you could argue that. I mean, you could make an argument that everything you do is arguably altruistic, but donating a specific bicycle or a specific piece of equipment to a local police department in connection with a relationship that they're building and they're supporting and furthering seems a lot more valid than the argument that we donate money to a political party, it'll be good for us. I think it's the donation to the the police department and that sort of thing is more likely to be validated because you can make a direct tangible connection. So like in those instances, that's why those communities would donate a bicycle, or they would donate something that you could connect directly to their communities, because this township had bicycle police that would go around all. I mean, each of these condominiums might have had 500 units in them. It was significant. It was a significant increase in the township's population through these Canadian developments. And I think the police department was saying, look, the more stuff we have, these are things we need to better enable us to patrol your communities. We'd like to get some younger policemen who want to work on bicycles, but we need bicycles. And the fire department says we'd like to have this new equipment, but it's hard to buy it. So I think in those instances there's definitely no issue, but it's very easy to tie specific money to a specific thing as opposed to a generalized, let's just give money to the the local politicians because they say that when we need them they'll come.
So let's talk about the politicians and political candidates and
Right.
people that are in office. A lot of associations provide opportunities to politicians, either already in office or running for office. So may a board invite one political candidate to speak and ignore another if they feel the political candidate they're asking to speak is advantageous to the association? Or is this going to be a case where they're required to invite both sides of the issues because the residents may want to see both?
Yeah, see, that's going to be really dependent upon what association dog is in the fight. So if the a candidate is coming to a building or a clubhouse to speak in relation to a particular issue or to try to get reelected, what is the association? The board isn't really doing anything other than just inviting someone to come speak. The association isn't paying a honorarium or paying for bodyguards or, so arguably you could take the position it's not really the board inviting anybody, it's just regular people who are simply looking to use the common areas to facilitate a particular activity, just like if they were renting the common elements to have a baby shower. So but the difference would be if the board is then using the official mechanisms of the association, where a candidate is allowed to put materials in a newsletter, but the other candidate is not. That's going to be most likely a problem. But the two aren't the same thing, because the former is simply just candidates or civic leaders using property, and anybody can rent. I mean, if the board has a policy that everybody can reserve space in the common areas for whatever reason, who cares what the reason is? If, of course, the board's policy is you can reserve space in the common areas only for Republicans, then that would be a problem.
I guess what I'm getting at, Dave, and this is a common scenario, there's associations that will not allow residents to have their own meetings in the common areas, meaning inviting people and having them speak. And there's also associations that do not provide rental opportunities. I'm talking about associations officially inviting a politician to speak at an association-sponsored event. Does the association have to provide the opportunity to both politicians, or can they pick and choose?
Well, so in this scenario, this association does not allow anybody to reserve any common areas use, but the board can for one political party. That's probably not going to be legal. But it's hard to believe that there's a community that could lawfully or even just politically or practically keep people from using common area space. I don't even know how would you do that? I mean, wouldn't an owner just automatically have the right to, use common area space?
I don't know if in every association an owner can just invite a politician and invite.
But can't they invite like their uncle to come hang out with them in the clubhouse? I mean, why would a politician be any different? I don't know that. That's what I'm saying. I don't know why the regulations have to be. It seems to me that the regulations don't. Everything has to be even-handed in this particular situation. Everything's got to be sort of non-arbitrary. So I don't see how a policy that prohibited people from having guests come to a clubhouse to speak to people, but yet allowing the board to do it for one particular political candidate, how that would be anything other than arbitrary.
The difference would be is when a resident invites people to participate in something in a common area, and it's not an official and association event, anything goes. They can be interrupted. There's no control of the scenario. Maybe there's no allowable use of a sound system. There's a big difference between boards.
That's okay, but so if there's no if the regulations prohibit the use of a sound system in a clubhouse, that seems to be a reasonable rule. But then if one owner or a board allows for the use of a sound system for one candidate, but refuses to allow my neighbor to do it for the other candidate, that's probably not going to be valid.
You're going in one direction where you're going in the direction where a resident is making a request to use a common area space. I'm going in the direction of where boards invite.
Right, but true, but I don't know that the active invitation, the only thing that matters is whether the association's property or funds are being used. I mean, the active invitation, just because the guy happens to be the president of a board, I mean, how does that create anything? So the guy has to resign from the board in order to invite someone to a clubhouse to talk to people?
No.
All that really matters is what is the associate, how is in fact the board doing anything? I mean, if the board wants to create a dynamic where the board is doing something, it's going to necessarily raise an issue as to its refusal to do it for somebody else. But I don't know why a board would frame anything like that. I mean, because it creates the dynamic of trouble. What would be the reason why a board would officially request make an invitation to only one candidate in an election? It's just naturally going to create a problem, as opposed to simply having regular people invite a candidate, or the board inviting both through an official thing. I don't think just inviting one would ever really be valid. So I don't know why anybody would ever do it when it's not necessary. The board doesn't need to invite someone to come talk to people. Regular people can. A regular person can, unless the association unless the common areas are not ever allowed to be used for gatherings. But then it would be improper for the board to then use it for a gathering for one candidate. It wouldn't work, because it would be arbitrary.
And then taking a step back, though, but what happens if one politician has a political view that's going to be beneficial to the association, and the other one has an opposite view that's not going to be beneficial?
No, I don't think it would. First of all, I don't even know how you'd prove that. I mean, it's one of those things where how do you prove, particular, health guideline thing is actually going to make everybody safer? I mean, how do you prove that one candidate is actually going to be better for a community? I mean, first of all, you can't even bind a candidate to, again, absent a bribe, you can't guarantee the candidate's going to do what you want after the person's elected. So I don't even know how you'd make that connection. So to me, the connection is way too vague and removed for that to be the justification. For someone to stand before a judge and say, yeah, we excluded this side of the ideological spectrum because this side, we, the board, has decided is better for our community. I mean, isn't that like just the height of tyranny? It's like, it just smells of something that someone would go, really? I don't know how that might not pass the laugh test. That's how I would look at it anyway.
Hi, Don. Thank you so much for being here today. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Beautiful day. September on the beach. What could be better?
Don, you are the former mayor of Atlantic City. You spent 2 decades on the Special Improvement District of Atlantic City, and you are currently running for Assembly.
That's correct.
So is it safe to say that you are quite familiar with politics and working with governmental agencies?
Yeah, I think that'd be a very fair statement from my experience.
And you are also the business administrator for Toms River.
Yeah, so that gave me a great opportunity. I went to Toms River, which is large, 100,000 people.
So I'm going to take advantage of having you here today to educate managers and board members on how to deal with governmental agencies. Sometimes managers and boards run into difficulty accomplishing on the governmental end. It could be a permit, it could be getting a street fixed, it could be a noise complaint. They just seem frustrated because they're not getting anywhere. What's the best way to approach a governmental agency or individual if you want to get something done? You're not getting it done. Should you work with the governmental official? Should you go to a politician? What is some advice for managers and boards to try to work better with the governmental agencies?
So in Atlantic County, Atlantic City is the only municipality gives you a full-time mayor who's actually the chief executive officer, and actually council members are prohibited from contacting department heads or suggesting that they perform any type of services. The other communities, the mayor is part-time. It's called a weak mayor and a strong council, and in that case you can contact almost anyone. In general, there's a business administrator, and that person, the BA, actually is in charge of the day-to-day operation of the town. So I would say the first place to start is usually with the BA. Now, if you're familiar with the services that you need, if you're having a problem with permits and you know who heads up that department and you find him to be helpful, then that's where you want to go. If you find that you're being blocked or you not being treated fairly, then you need to go to the BA. And if you still don't get an answer, then you need to go right up to the mayor's office to make sure that they're aware of it.
Do city officials get upset and annoyed when managers and boards try to contact a politician compared to just sticking with the city official? What would be a negative interaction? What would a city official would not want someone to do?
So I think in general, every association's a little bit different. In some cases, all of the road work, for instance, within the area that you're managing actually belongs to the town. So that becomes a little bit easier. You're calling on behalf of homeowners, on behalf of property taxpayers, on behalf of voters, and there's a problem with the streets that the city owns. So when it comes to questions about trash collection or recycling or the condition of the roadways, that should be very simple, because all you're doing is representing individuals, and it's a lot easier to talk to a manager that's representing 50, 100, 200 or more family owners than it is to talk to all 17 people on that particular street.
What motivates, though, a city official to help out a manager or an association?
So I can tell you, picking up the phone, screaming and yelling, telling them your constitutional rights, and making some accusation that they're not doing their job, probably not the best way to find a solution that you're going to find to be beneficial. I think calling, representing a group of people, explaining that they are all taxpayers and that they are all voters in the city, and explaining that you have an issue and you're calling to see how you can find the solution to that particular issue. That's usually the best way to handle it. I can tell you the easiest way to deal with groups of people is through an association, because you're going to talk to someone that's a little bit better educated about what municipal law is, what state law is, and they've probably already hit a lot of questions, so they're not going to waste your time. In other cases, the question is the condition of the street, that you don't control. And that is saying, hey, we've been here 28 years. We know that streets need to be repaved every 25 years. Has the engineer done some evaluation of the condition of roadways in our town? And if he does, could you tell me where we fit and when the scheduled date is for the street to be repaired? That's an easier way to go. If it's a year, 3 years, 5 years away, you can say, well, at this point we have unreasonable flooding. It's actually soaking up a tower. So can we find some part-time solution? Can we do some road repairs? Can we do some immediate paving until we wait for the streets to be repaved? In other cases, I think it's just kind of common sense. You're saying, listen, our neighbors are concerned about the lighting. Would you come out and take a look? I think the problem is trees that are blocking the light, or I think the fact is the amount of amps, the amount of wattage is too low for our neighborhood. And switching over to LED, would that make more sense? And if you have the information, let the town know that they can do a re-electrification to LED lighting that actually wouldn't cost the town money, and after a few years would actually save the municipality, because LED lighting is so much less expensive.
When you've been both a business administrator and a mayor of a large city, do government officials get turned off when people contact politicians to try to get them to be motivated? Is there a misconception that sometimes politicians can do more than they can really, as far as influencing a governmental agency? Or sometimes associations just better work within the governmental agency, because it may turn into a negative if you try to do, I don't know what the right word would be, a runaround or go above. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Sure. So, I'm going to use my example as business administrator in Toms River. I went to an association that represented homeowners. Some of their issues when I became a BA were simple. I didn't have to go any further. I came to a meeting, I listened to it, and within a couple of days we were on top of that. Low cost, simple solutions. I think you always want to go to the person that's in charge. So if you're dealing with someone and they either don't provide you the services that you need, or they're just rude, or they're not effective, then I think you got to figure out what the next person is going up to change. But you want to go to the elected officials for that big picture, things that they don't have the authority to do.
Do people have misconceptions on how complex government is? When you were mayor, did people think that you could just magically wave a wand, or when you were the business administrator, was there misconceptions on how easy it is to get things done? Is it a lot more complex than it appears?
Yeah, it certainly is. So, everyone wants to tell you they want to run a municipality, the county, the state, like a business. That's what we want to hear. But in reality, that's not what we always are able to do. So there are different layers within government that control different parts. But a local official should be able to know who's in charge of that particular issue and be able to help you navigate to get that done. In some cases, you need to bring a group of people together to a council meeting to make sure the council knows that it's not one individual that wants a change, but it's a group of residents that need that type of change and hope to have that happen. And in some cases, it's moving up onto the state and asking the state for help. So navigating your way through is always a critical part. When you go to a municipality and you're not asking them for money, that's the easiest way to do things. Or if you're explaining to them that funding is available from another source, I think that helps very much. In the case I gave you with Tom's River, so the association said, listen, we're willing to pay up to $10,000 to bring in a mediator because we really want this property. So that was a huge part. It was very easy for me to go to all the parties involved saying, listen, the homeowners, the property owners, the people who are paying the taxes, the people are willing to put up $10,000 of their own money. It's only a few hundred of them, but they're looking for a solution. And so they don't want to hear that we're an impasse, that the other guy is the problem in things. And that ultimately found the solution. And the association gained a lot of respect from the municipality and from the state for stepping up and becoming part of the solution.
Thank you so much, Don.
Thank you.
Let's go in an opposite direction because this takes place also. An association pays for either a board member or someone in some official manner from the association to attend a political event. They want to be seen. They want to have influence, as far as governmental officials go.
Right.
Can a board pay for a board member or someone in an official manner to attend a political event or call it a fundraiser?
Well, call it a fundraiser. I mean, they're paying to attend an event, which essentially is a fundraiser.
Right.
That's the point, right? Okay. So yeah, I think that could be potentially legal. Yeah. I mean, had the reasonableness of the funds, the extent of the connection, an association paying $1,000 for a board member to attend a fundraiser for the president of the United States. It's a lot different than paying, even $1,000 to attend the fundraiser of the mayor. The latter would seem to be a lot more reasonable and valid than the former, even though it might be more fun to go to the presidential fundraiser one. But I think that's legitimate as long as you can connect the purpose and it's non-ideological and the amount is reasonable. But then if another board member or another owner asked for the same, asked to do it for the other side, it may be difficult to say no. It's the same thing why a lot of regular people, why schools or businesses or, you try to avoid letting, you have an office of 50 employees and, a person one of the guys in the office comes in one day and wants to put a flag up that references a candidate that's running for president. And the boss says, look, we don't do that here. Not because he or she might actually disagree with the name on the flag, but it just creates a dynamic when it seems that one side is favored over the other. So I think in your example, I think it'd be totally legitimate depending upon the amount and the circumstance But if another board member or an owner wanted to have the same opportunity for the purpose of the community, but it was with the other side, it might be very difficult to legally defend a no, or a denial of that request.
So this is kind of a challenging topic, is why I picked it, because I could go back around, Dave, and then one candidate, once again, could be more supportive of the association compared to another.
Maybe. How would you? I don't know how you would. I would argue. I mean, I didn't want to finish the question, but to me, the premise is flawed. I don't know how you would ever determine that any one candidate is better for an association. Because I mean, look, one candidate could say, if I'm elected, I'm going to make sure your garbage is reimbursed or is picked up, which could be a significant value to the community. But the other candidate says, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to make sure your taxes are cut 50%. I mean, what makes the house more valuable? Free garbage or lower taxes? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'll be easier to sell your house if your tax rate is lower than it is if you have free garbage. But the point is, I don't know how you can make an argument that anything a politician promises you is not necessarily the best thing that could work for your community. And it also might change 6 months from now. It might be totally different. Free garbage might not be that great of a promise, because maybe the federal government's decided to pick up your garbage, and now the guy's promise was worthless. So, I mean, I think the premise of the question is, is difficult. But
so
we can go with it.
Let me throw another scenario at you. There is a civic organization, and they are we're against the garbage transfer station, right? Which just happened, is going to be next door to the association.
That's the NIMBY. We want the garbage station to be the next town over. We want it, but it has to be over there, not here.
So there's a civic organization, we're against the garbage station building. It's right next door to the association. So in that case, can the association donate money to that civic association? And, then I'm going to ask you, can they ask the civic association to come to the association to speak in somewhat promoting them or endorsing them?
Right. I think under that scenario, the answer is almost invariably yes, that's appropriate. I also think it's appropriate if they wanted to facilitate a garbage transfer station. I mean, there may be a scenario where it might be better for the community to have a garbage transfer station right next door. It depends on the situation, but it might be. And so, but I think either way is completely appropriate, assuming that all those things are true. And then you'd only have to consider the fact if there was an owner or a group of people in the community that felt that the use of their funds to oppose a garbage transfer station was inappropriate, because they feel the garbage transfer station would be a good thing. Then they were going to come forward. They were going to look. There's another civic association that is lobbying for this, and we'd like to support that. And I guess you have to look at that. But if the only thing presented was a gas station being put next door, a garbage transfer station, or the building of a highway that's going to go over your neighborhood, and there's a civic association that's trying to stop that, and that's the only question presented, I think it's almost invariably appropriate to donate to that.
But then I heard you also mention that if other residents or owners don't feel the same, that could be an issue. And I can almost guarantee that there's going to be other individuals that are going to disagree, no matter what the board policy is.
True, but if someone disagrees, but there's no alternative civic association, there's no civic association in favor of the interstate highway being built over the neighborhood, then there isn't much the board could do. You know what I mean? Like the owners would simply be arguing that the expenditure was not appropriate, but yet owners argue that expenditures aren't appropriate all the time for a variety of things. I think as long as the board could justify it, and then in your example, I think they could, then the owners couldn't stop it through legal means, and they could run for the board and try to do those sorts of things. But I don't think a judge would stop it.
So I don't want to get sidetracked on this and spend a lot of time on it, but I wanted to talk about freedom of speech in regard to owners having the ability to express their opinion in a political manner at an association event. And I know that state and local governments are not allowed to not give people the freedom of speech, but does an association or a board have the right not to allow a resident to offer a political opinion at an official association meeting?
You mean political opinion? You mean political opinion vis-a-vis that particular association, or who's a better president of the United States? Political opinion.
I'm talking about I'm talking about local government. For the most part, these issues are local government.
So non-association political. Like I want trustee A to be trustee B. You're talking about local political issues about the mayoral election, or where the traffic lights are going to go, and how the who's going to run the local local soccer clubs and that kind of thing. I mean, all local governmental things.
Correct, because many associations will invite the mayor to speak once a year. That's a common scenario.
Right.
Which does that kind of that falls into a different category though, because that's just the policy. I guess as long as they invite the mayor every year, no matter who he is, it's acceptable. Is that an accurate statement?
It depends. It'll depend. I mean, inviting them, it would depend. Inviting the mayor to speak every year when there's no election and no alternative to invite, then there's not a problem. But if there's an alternative to invite, a candidate, there's an opposing candidate, and it's and some owner or board member wants to invite the other person, then it'd be hard pressed to say no.
Invite the other person to an official association.
Right. Like, yeah, if there's an election every, I don't know how mayors do it. Some of them are like every year. I don't even know. So arguably, town council and municipal elections are all the time. School board election. I mean, this stuff's all the time. So arguably, it's always an election season in respect of local government. Only in congressional and national elections tend to be the ones that have significant breaks of time. So I don't know that you could argue any municipal speaker is doing it outside the context of an election. But if the mayor wants to come speak and the board wants the mayor to come speak, sounds like a great idea, regardless of party, who cares? But then if there's a opposition mayor who contacts an owner and the owner petitions the board to let him or her come, I think it probably would be illegal if the board said no.
So in a general term, can an association endorse a political view they feel is advantageous to the association? And here's the scenario. The association has a newsletter. Can the board put in the newsletter, look, this is our view on this political issue, because they're going to, I keep going back because it's an easy scenario. They're going to build this horrible thing next to us, right? And it's
you go back to that scenario because it does happen. I mean, and argue, and it comes up with, it's political action committees. It often goes to whether a board can hire a lawyer to fight the approvals for a local transfer station. I mean, it's not a slam dunk yes. There are certainly people in the community that are going to think, why am I paying for a lawyer to oppose something that I think I would actually like to happen? So, but it's probably legitimate depending upon the circumstance. So I think your metaphor, your hypothetical is a good one, because that's mostly when you see these things come up, at least in the financial end. But yeah, I don't think there's anything inappropriate with the board, including opinions and newsletters, but anything, even if it's the, I don't know, NATO or something that has the, relations with Taiwan. I mean, something that has nothing to do with the individual sort of issues connected to the community. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The issue only becomes when you have arbitrary controls and arbitrary restrictions. So if someone wants to put an article in about something else and you say no, that's when you start to run afoul of the constitutional protections.
So the board has to allow a contradictory response to what they have put in the newsletter, or are they free just to express their political opinion in the newsletter? And is it, they're only allowed to do that if they can rationalize that it's in the best interest of the association? I hit you with several
Yeah, it's
items.
okay. I mean, I would think that every person can rationalize almost everything they do, even if it's something that's completely irrational. I think once an association creates a forum for communications, it would be hard pressed to limit participation in those communications on an ideological or sort of political basis. I think if you had I mean, it's annoying because ultimately it's always extreme examples that help to, or that people try to use to prove an argument. But if you have a newsletter or a website, and the website allows, there's a board member who particularly likes to write articles about matters. Let's just keep it simple. Matters of local interest. They might be political in some way, but they're local. Parks, police departments, things like that. And some owner wants to write an article about how awful the police department is and how it's engaged in racial discrimination and all the things that the worst things you could ever hear about a police officer or a police department. And the board wanted to refuse that. It would be complicated, especially if that person wanted to raise political opinions about the police that weren't incendiary. We'd like police reform, defund the police, all these things that maybe people don't agree with, but it's just free speech, as opposed to if you see a police officer, you should make sure you throw something at him. You know what I mean? And that would be sort of something that would be advocating violence or something inappropriate. But once you engage, and I think once you create a platform that opens itself up to those sort of issues, it's under current law, it's very difficult to say no to somebody, just on the basis of the content.
And we're going to wrap this up soon here, but let me throw another scenario that came my way from another state, actually. Can a board ban owners from handing out political materials at official association activities? And this could be a board meeting open to the public. This could be the association barbecue. So the scenario is an owner who is going around and handing out, political pamphlets for one politician. Can a board or association say, look, we're just not going to have that go on here?
Maybe the board meeting is easier to say yes to. Leaving aside the real world issues of how you're actually going to stop someone from handing something out at a barbecue. I mean, I hope you're not planning on putting your hands on the guy and throwing him out. I mean, that creates a whole nother story. But I think there are, associations can create time, place, and matter restrictions. And I think if you're trying to have a board meeting and someone's in the audience handing out pamphlets, I think a board would have a very, very strong argument that they could limit that. But they probably couldn't preclude the guy from being out in the parking lot doing it. Time, place, and matter. What makes the most sense in a particular scenario? I think if you're having a community barbecue, everyone's invited, the association's money being used to, there's a bouncy house for kids, there's, food, and some guy is walking around handing out pamphlets. I think that'd be very difficult to legally preclude. I don't know that I think it'd be very difficult to convince a judge to issue a court order that prohibited the guy from handing out pamphlets. I don't even know how you'd enforce it. Forget the physical contact aspect. I mean, how would you even prove the guy? I mean, so he can't pass out pamphlets. I assume he's going to be allowed to talk to people about a candidate. How would you ever control that? I mean, that's more of like it's a free country kind of thing. It'd be very difficult to control that. I don't think a judge would find that's a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. But I think a board meeting, official association operations, managers out on the site with a contractor, and an owner is trying to talk to the manager and the contractor about voting for a particular candidate, you could probably prohibit those kinds of things.
So I know, Dave, I'm going to get a lot of comments and questions about this segment, which is awesome. It's kind of a challenging, I think, conversation because there's so many different scenarios.
Maybe they're going to want to know how much money is in that donate jar there behind you.
But, tell me if I understand the big picture today properly. Technically, there's nothing legally that keeps boards from, getting involved in politics. There's nothing on the state level, correct? Unless they're governing documents.
Correct. No, correct. As a general matter, correct.
But a board could find themselves being challenged by an owner if the board cannot clearly communicate why they picked one political candidate over another. And you're basically recommending don't even go that route because you can't. Is that an accurate statement so far?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty accurate statement. I think the generalized donate to a political party thing, one side and not another, is the avenue that's going to be most fraught with peril. But donating money to both parties, both candidates, both sides, providing all kinds of access and information to both sides, that's even if money is involved, I think would be very difficult for an owner to challenge that.
But in the case of a group that has a well-defined goal, like we don't want the garbage dump to be next to our association organization, that would be a lot easier for a board to rationalize supporting financially,
right,
and endorsing them and publicizing them, correct?
Right, correct. Because in that scenario, an owner who was in favor of the garbage transfer station might have a political argument, against what the board is doing, but it would be probably unable, he or she would be unable, most likely, to get a judge to stop it. You know what I mean? As long as all the standard processes were followed, how the board voted, where the money came from, and if they could make a generalized showing that there was in fact a garbage transfer station, and that it might be a good idea. Not has to be a good idea, but it might be a good idea to stop it. The threshold for that would be for analysis would be very low legally for that type of thing, and probably means that the owner who was annoyed by it would be left without a legal remedy, meaning they couldn't go to court to stop it in that particular situation.
So we covered a lot, Dave. Was there any, I really felt like I kind of challenged you today and threw a lot of different scenarios at you. Is there a scenario that I didn't mention, or do you have any closing thoughts on what we've spoken about so far?
I think it's interesting the approach that you took in this sort of with this sort of fact pattern or these sort of issues, because most of the time I see questions about a board's ability to control people's expressions, their religious declarations, sort of an association power to limit the rights of people that live there. This discussion was more about the association's affirmative ability to advocate a particular thing or to invite particular people, and I see that's rare. That's rare where that is the issue that presents itself to me. I've been to meetings, and you show up, and the guy running for mayor's talks for 5 minutes, or a person, lady running for a state senator talks for 20 minutes, answers questions. I don't think anybody even seems to care. Like my experience has been the people in the audience aren't annoyed because the person is of one party or another. So especially when it comes to local things, I generally think that there seems to be a pretty decent willingness on the part of owners, at least that those who bother to come to meetings or who read newsletters and do these kinds of things, that they're willing to leave aside any legal challenges when the issues are clearly local in interest, even if they tend to be ideological. Even if the mayor happens to be a Democrat and you're a Republican, and every time the mayor shows up in your newsletter, he's writing an article about something, but it's something that relates to the community, the town. Even if you don't like it, it's still where the traffic lights are, whether we're hiring police officers, whether we're buying another fire truck. The focus on that is more about the topic. I think when associations get into from affirmatively, when they're talking about dollars going out or involving information, the farther away the politics gets from the local, from your community, the more problematic it's going to be. You know, like just like in a school, your kids go to school. If the mayor comes in to talk to to the school kids, it's one thing, nobody will care. But if all of a sudden the governor shows up and he's talking about whether or not the taxes should be this high or that high, then of course half the parents will be annoyed by it. So I think for the most part, if the boards are staying local, even if it tends to be political, ideological, my experience has been 27 plus years that most people in a community aren't going to oppose it, even if it involves association funds, because I think people understand that when it comes to local things, a board should be probably engaged, or the community should be engaged. You want your voice to be heard, you got to speak. So it makes sense for you to have a relationship with the mayor, regardless of what party he's from.
Unless it's election time, because we talked about earlier, that may be an issue where you may want to invite the opposing candidate. But let me just throw this in there, and then we'll wrap up. What about if you invite the mayor and he just sticks to the facts? That would be more acceptable, right? The mayor shows up and gives more of a report what's going on within your town, compared to getting involved in political issues. That would be a scenario where maybe the board doesn't need to invite the opposing candidate because the mayor is just there to provide some form of report.
I guess that's what you'll tell a judge if it comes up. I don't know how much that would fly. My experience has been that mayors, I've been to many meetings where politicians have come. Sometimes I'm not even aware, it's not even announced what party they're from, although where you are, you can pretty much figure it out. If you have a meeting in Jersey City and the mayor comes, it's a Democrat. If you have a meeting in, I don't know, let's say Cape May. I don't know where Republicans tend to be mayors, but somewhere in Monmouth County, maybe they tend to have a lot of Republican mayors there. You should sort of assume the party, but then they get into political types of things. But they're smart people. I mean, you don't attack the other side's ideology or politics when you're in a room with people you don't know who they are. I mean, why would you do that? When you're at a political speech or a fundraiser and everybody in the room is your guy, you say whatever the hell you want to say because they're going to cheer you either way. When you go into a community, a clubhouse where there's 30 people sitting there and you don't know who the hell they support, I mean, why would any smart politician start to make wisecracks about the other person? So I think that the presentation is always going to feel like it's a report, and any smart politician is going to be able to weave in vote for me with a general report. I was able, we had a great year last year. This happened, and this is really good for your community. And I was able to call the governor when this happened. So it was really good that I have a relationship with the governor. I mean, that's election speech, but it's also useful to as a report. So it's really hard to dissect those things, I think.
So Dave, I think we're going to be talking about this again because this is going to go out, and I know I'm going to get a tremendous amount of emails with different scenarios. So we will be back to this topic, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Thank you so much for being here. It's much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you for joining us with the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next one, which will be about parking garages. It's a good one. Lots of photos, lots of different aspects of parking garages. Very much interested in your questions and opinions, so please feel free to email them to me. And once again, I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.